Hey, how's it going, everybody? Shaun here for another daily movie review. Today, we're going to be talking about the recently released documentary on HBO Max, Class Action Park. The description of the documentary is as follows: a documentary that focuses on a dangerously legendary water park and its slew of injuries and crimes, along with child safety concerns. It's narrated by John Hodgman, and it's directed by Seth Porges and Chris Charles Scott III. This is kind of their first thing. I know this guy, Chris Charles Scott, had done a few other things. The Shape of Shreveport, What About Waco? This doesn't have any information, so I'm not sure if it ever even actually came out. But anyways, documentary about this water park. I knew or found out about this, I guess would be the better way to put it. I found out about Action Park a few years ago, mostly because there was a Johnny Knoxville movie of the same name, Action Park, that came out. And then Johnny Knoxville stars as like the proprietor of the park, and it goes through all the wacky things. And then they do kind of, it's like a narrative, but then there's also like these Jackass-esque stunts in the movie, light Jackass-esque stunts. Because Johnny Knoxville, if you don't know this, is an old guy, and all the Jackass guys, the ones that are alive, they're all older, and they just can't really fucking do it anymore. Your body just won't allow you to do that. So the stunts are like, they're okay, which is crazy because Johnny Knoxville and the crew, they're making a Jackass 4, the movie, and I was just like, what are they gonna do? Like, what kind of stunts are they gonna do? But anyways, I never really heard of this park. It was from New Jersey. It closed in like 1996, and as the documentary goes through, it kind of goes through this kind of like a nostalgic walk back of the people that went to the park, some of the people that are now kind of famous in the comedy scene and whatnot, and the kind of the cultural impact of it in the area of New Jersey. It did kind of blow up. It was even on like featured on MTV at some point, where people went there to it's like the craziest water park. It was kind of like anything goes kind of water park. It was built by people that really didn't know what they were doing particularly well. Like, they weren't particularly skilled. They weren't like engineers. And then the guy who runs the park, who I'm fucking completely blanking on his name right now. He was kind of like willing to just let people come in and experiment with ideas that they had for like water park stuff, which was kind of wild, right? And it leads to a lot of things that are very dangerous. That people got hurt constantly. Yada, yada, yada. It becomes like kind of a rite of passage for people that live in the area. And, people got seriously hurt, seriously maimed. I'm looking for this guy's fucking name. It's now called Mountain Creek Water Park if you want to go check it out. It's still open. Why don't they just have this dude's name? Eugene Mulvihill. Eugene Mulvihill. That's the guy. That's the important piece of information that I just needed for a fucking passing second. There you go. That's how the sausage is made, is everybody. I can look up Google. I can Google things like the best of them, right? Anyway, so this Eugene Mulvihill, he's kind of just like an entrepreneur, kind of like also kind of a shady dude. What you find out as the documentary progresses, is that he has mob ties. He definitely has ties to the local government in the area. It allows him to get away with a lot of stuff. Doesn't have like legit like business insurance. It's a park that probably should have been closed because it would not pass any type of safety standards ever. Like, people just got really hurt all the time, and apparently it got so bad at one point that the local like EMTs, because it's in a small town in New Jersey, and they only had like so many people working, as EMTs in the town, and they were driving ambulances and whatnot. And they would be like, at some point, I guess they had to say, like, we can't just keep coming here. We can't. Like, we don't have the manpower to do this. So that was just kind of a funny bit of trivia. But the documentary itself, I thought, was like pretty mediocre. It's got real tonal problems. Like, it does not really have a good grasp on like its thesis or what it's trying to say about the park or the culture surrounding the park or anything like that. It just doesn't have much to say. It's just kind of like the first hour of the movie is basically just talking about each of the individual rides and how crazy they were. And you kind of get talking heads. You get people that used to work at the park. You get, like I said, you get some famous people coming in talking about their experiences as children going to this park and these rides. And then it turns kind of like dark in the third act, basically. It's kind of like almost, or actually it's really split up into like 2 acts, because you have an hour of just like, whoa, this fun, crazy, wild place that was also very dangerous, and there's a lot of wild stuff happened, and here are some of those wild and crazy stories. And then it's like, third act, it's like, and then people fucking died. And then we go talk to the parents and some of the family members of people that have died. And this man was corrupt, and he was involved with corrupt politicians. And then it goes back like, oh, but it was crazy. Blah! There's even a piece of voiceover at one point. Not voiceover. There's an interview that's like the audio is put over some video elements of like the family going to visit the grave of their son that died by getting his fucking head smashed on rocks when he got thrown from an alpine slide. And if you don't know what an alpine slide is, it's like it's basically kind of like a luge almost, when you're on like this little cart and you go down a hill, and it's like a cement track. And theirs was completely dangerous, and and yeah, they didn't stay on it very well. And yeah, so there's this thing talking about like it was the wildest times, it was crazy shit. And then you have like their parents going to the grave of this kid, in current era, current day. Like was just like an example, I guess, of sort of the tonal whiplash and just not really knowing what the fuck the documentary was like kind of getting at. Honestly, I found it pretty boring. Like, if you don't really have much to say, if it's just like an exploration of what the park was, you could have done like a 45-minute like little mini doc about that. Like, it didn't need to be feature length. It didn't need to get into this other stuff that it only touches on. It only touches on kind of the legal problems that he was having, or how he got around stuff, this Eugene dude. And then it gets into, the some of the deaths and what the family tried to do, but it only really touches, like, in terms of legally, it only touches on that stuff. It doesn't really get very deep into it. It feels so slight. Like, it's like, why even go there? I mean, you could mention that people died, maybe. And I understand wanting to represent the voices of somebody that lost somebody to this park, and because of its mismanagement. Like, I understand why you would want to do that, but it just does not. It doesn't like fit in with the movie they made. I was just like, why isn't this really about the story of this Eugene guy? Why isn't he kind of the through line? Why don't we just start with him and then kind of build forward like into the era of the park and afterwards? And it doesn't do that. So it just kind of feels like disparate. It feels there's a lot of just moving pieces that don't ever feel like they're adding up to anything all that interesting. I mean, there might be some things in a vacuum, some funny stories, some anecdotes that will make you chuckle, that'll make you laugh. But as far as it being like a coherent whole piece, I was pretty disappointed in it. I didn't have any expectations for it, honestly. I saw it was there. I was like, oh, that might be something interesting. Because I have seen that Johnny Knoxville comedy from a few years ago, like I said. It's not very good. It's not a good movie. And it completely changes the entire paradigm of this park and what was happening at the park. Other than people getting hurt, that's really the only thing it really addresses. But it's not a good movie. And in this documentary, kind of the same, pretty mediocre. I wish it was better. I should have known better. Anytime I see John Hodgman in something, I don't know why. I don't really like John Hodgman. I think his stand-up is awful. He's been funny in some movies, but I'm not a big... He's like one of these pseudo-intellectual, like, NPR guys. He's like a drier and worse Patton Oswalt. That's my opinion. I don't know. Just never been a big fan of him. I don't know why. Maybe I'm being overly harsh. Maybe I should give him another chance. But as soon as I saw him, or heard his voice rather, I was like, oh, here we go. Here we go. Yeah, I mean, there's not really much else to say. It's like a lot of talking heads. It has like this shitty animation thing that it does to kind of fill in the gaps. Because there's obviously not a ton of footage of some of this stuff. So they have to figure out ways to dramatically recreate what people are talking about. You want to give people more of a visceral experience. It's called Class Action Park, but it really does not get into any or most of the lawsuits maybe that the park has to deal with. It seemed to like kind of make the case that because of Eugene's kind of position in the community that he didn't have to deal with too many of those. I don't know. So I don't know why you would call it Class Action Park. It just didn't, like, that would have been something interesting to explore. Like, how did he actually survive this stuff? It feels like it's like this so ephemeral. It's like lazy journalism, if you wanted to call this a piece of journalism. Like, you know, when you do a documentary about some sort of historical piece or something like this specific, something like, you would think that there'd be more research or some more effort put into it. And it doesn't seem like that is the aim of this documentary. It's just supposed to be kind of a lark. And I'm not sure what the fuck you're supposed to take away from it. Like I said, it's really dissonant. And it doesn't make a good case for its own existence at some point. I mean, honestly, like, I was watching it with my wife, and I was like, is this still like, fucking on? Like, and we were about 45, 50 minutes through, and I was like, I was very close to just shutting it off. Because I was like, what's the point of what? This is not interesting. And then I was like, well, you know, I've come so far. It's only like 90 minutes long. Might as well see it through. And instead of like, you know, building towards something, it just kind of feels like it just does a hard pivot, and then suddenly it's kind of dramatic. Start talking about the deaths, the family anecdotes. And then it just kind of goes back to what like the form it had before for 10 minutes, and then the last 5 minutes it just kind of mixes the two, and it just leaves a bad taste in your mouth, honestly. I was not a big fan of Class Action Park, I guess, as you could probably tell. I wish it was better. There's a lot of interesting things to explore. Like, like I said, why didn't we explore this Eugene guy's life? Like, why isn't he the through line? Because he is the story. The park is almost secondary. Because it's his vision, it's his greed, it's his whatever you want to call it that leads the park to being what it is. And that's the kind of thing, like, it just feels like just anecdotes instead of having some sort of greater arc about the park and why the park was the way it was. It doesn't have it there. And I think Eugene is the key to that. And for some reason, they just didn't want to deal with that. And I'm not sure why. Maybe there might be a reason I'm not aware of. Maybe they tried to, and maybe they tried cuts where that was the case. But I don't know. I don't know why that wouldn't be looked at as him as being some sort of eccentric character, like worthy of exploration. Because it's his eccentricities that are reflected in the park. You know, you should be able to like maybe draw a parallel. You know, I'm no filmmaker, so I don't know. Maybe I'm just a big dummy. I don't know, everybody. But if you have HBO Max, I don't know. I'd give this like a 5 out of 10, maybe. Like, it's not awful. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen. I was just kind of bored with it. I just didn't find like the anecdotes that interesting on their own. You know, I needed something else to kind of pull me through, and it just wasn't there. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. If you'd like to know more about ZooBox, you want to keep up to date with everything ZooBox, there's a bunch of links in the description for Facebook, for Instagram, for my personal Twitter. Also, if you would like to make a request for one of these daily videos, or a ZooBox goes to the movies, leave it in the comments, and I'll put it on the list. All right, everybody. You have the greatest one.